I live in Hong Kong since 2010, so it's been 14 years. And I came to Hong Kong because I wanted to experience a non-Western country, a non-Western thinking. So I decided to come to Asia, and I came here to do a research in university. I came after I already graduated in psychology. I specialized in psychotherapy, studying psychoanalysis. I already had a few years of clinical experience in Italy. And then I came to Hong Kong not knowing much about Hong Kong. So I don't know if you ever came to this part of the world, but first of all, I want to say that Hong Kong is a quite unique place. Usually in Europe, when we think about Asia, I think there's the idea of quite a homogeneous place, no? Asia, the mysterious Asia, the mysterious Orient. Actually, Asia is a very large continent. It's larger than Europe, and there is much more variety than in Europe. In Asia, there is a very large population. There are a lot of different political systems. There are republics, there are Islamic republics, one-party system, monarchies. There are different socio-economic system, different cultural, linguistic, and religious system. There is Buddhism, Hinduism, Christianity, Islam, Shintoism, and then there are places like China that profess atheism. So I want to say this just to make clear that Hong Kong is not representative of all Asia. There are for sure many similarities across different Asian countries, but Hong Kong is very different from other places. It has a strong Chinese background, although it's different from what is called the mainland China. There is some similarity with also. Yeah?
Can I just, excuse me to interrupt you, would it be possible for you to get a bit closer to the microphone?
Yeah. It's better like this?
Yes, yes.
I try to speak louder, okay?
Sorry to interrupt, please.
It's okay. Yeah, I was saying that Hong Kong is, what I will say today, it's my experience in this tiny place. I'm not speaking for the whole Asia. I came to Hong Kong in 2010 to do a research university. I traveled a lot before coming to Hong Kong, but I can say here I experienced what is called the cultural shock, which I never experienced before, because the Hong Kong Chinese culture is really different than our Greek Christian tradition. There is not, it didn't originate from the Aristotelian logic. There is a very distinctive, a very unique way of thinking and speaking. There is a very different relation to the word, to the speech. So I think it represents really an otherness, an other. And for me, as a European, it has been a process of not only discovering the Chinese culture in Hong Kong, but really it has been a an experience of displacement and a process of discovery of our culture, Italian in particular, European, and all the things that we give for granted, all the assumptions that usually we give for granted. So I came to do a PhD at university, and I was granted a scholarship at the beginning, and my project was to investigate, to explore how psychoanalysis is practiced in Hong Kong, and this project was approved, and they gave me the scholarship, and when I arrived here, I found out that actually there is no psychoanalysis at all, that psychoanalysis is not being practiced at all. So it was quite surprising and quite interesting, to be honest, because we are speaking of a city of 7 million people, and psychoanalysis simply didn't resonate with most of the people. I was trying to say what my profession is, what my job. People simply could not understand. So I had to flip my research, I had to shift to why psychoanalysis is not being practiced in Hong Kong, why it is not being received. And again, something that I gave for granted, that everybody knows it, and that there must be some psychoanalyst in any bigger city, and simply there was not. So let's say that my research originated from these premises, and you can understand also the difficulty of doing a research on psychoanalysis where psychoanalysis there is not. It was a real challenge, because I could not interview any psychoanalyst, I could not do research on anything ongoing. And so I had to come up with some idea. The challenge was how to do research about psychoanalysis if psychoanalysis not even exists. And this challenged me to find different ways to describe psychoanalysis, no? To put aside the jargon, because when we speak between analysts or people in analysis, we have these assumptions that we know what we are talking about, and so it's easy to communicate because both we give for granted, no, the names, but here the names didn't mean anything, and so it's a challenge. And then what is psychoanalysis? What we mean when we say psychoanalysis? Because we cannot rely on concepts. So my effort to trying to describe psychoanalysis was to find some dimension beside the concept, no, that could describe what we do in analysis. So being in university, I had to do an academic research, which means I had to collect a lot of data, which means I had to do some questionnaires, which mean statistics. So this added another level of difficulty, no? Because in psychoanalysis we usually don't do research with statistics, but I had to learn also statistics, and I built a questionnaire. And I built this questionnaire that I submitted to about 200 local counselors, psychologists, and social workers. Because the interesting part is that psychoanalysis is not known in Hong Kong. but there are a multitude of other counseling orientations, many that I never heard before. In Italy, I was familiar with CBT, behaviorism, with cognitive therapy, something like this, systemic therapy. Here, I learned there are 20, 30 more. And it was very interesting. Here in Hong Kong, there is no regulation for the profession. Everybody can claim to be a counselor. There are some academic degrees now, very short, 1 year. Everybody can enroll in these courses and become a counselor. And then there are, the majority are social workers, which means also the attitude, the inclination in this city, in this culture that remains a collective culture, as most Asian society. So their approach is more collective, so the social work. And then there are some clinical psychologists that resemble very much the clinical psychology programs that we have in Europe or in the US. So my research was to try to somehow to assess, to explore, to ask these people how they practice, how they do their clinical work. And let's say that in the end, what I thought is distinctive about psychoanalysis compared to all these other orientations is the way we listen. In the end, I would say that psychoanalysis, the main features is the way we listen and understand, which is different than any other counseling approach, because what is distinctive about psychoanalysis is the floating attention, the unconscious. This is what distinguishes from the counselors will say active listening, but the counseling, CBT, all this psychotherapy, they always remain more or less at the manifest level, at the obvious meaning. They don't have a listening that goes beyond this more manifest level. In the end, the invention of psychoanalysis is the invention of the unconscious, meaning there is always other beyond what is being verbalized. So this, in the end, the way we listen is what distinguish psychoanalysis from any other practice, I would say. So, of course, this was the major finding also in my research, because in a culture like Hong Kong, in a culture like Chinese culture, like in most Asian cultures, where there is a strong emphasis on the collective, there is a strong hierarchy, there is a strong hierarchical system. Cultures in Asia oftentimes are emphasize the listening. So one could think that's perfect. They emphasize the listening. They should be very much attentive. But the listening, as is intended in Hong Kong, in China, in many Asian culture, is a listening to the other person, to the small other, we could say, no, and listening to the person in front of me, caught in this, maybe in this relation, in this system of relationships. Who is talking, what is the relation that the person has towards me. For example, in Hong Kong, it's quite a hierarchical society, but Japan even more, China also, no? It may change the structure. Maybe in Japan is more the group, in China, or the company, in China is more the group, in Hong Kong maybe more the family or the boss, but there is an emphasis on the relational dimension. So there is an emphasis on the relational dimension of the world. Where does the world come from? This is the question. It's I don't like maybe this metaphor, but we can say it's a flat dimension, as opposed to maybe a more Western European tradition, we can say vertical, no? To say that maybe in our tradition the world is the world, no? There is an inner dimension, or there is a sense of religiosity, so a word that comes from a God, but it's a very distinctive relation with the world. Here the word comes from the authority. It doesn't matter, and other things don't matter so much. So I think this was one major finding, and also one difficulty why something like psychoanalysis is difficult to develop here, even in the relation, in the transference. Again, no, there is a transference in the sense of a resistance, we can say. There is a relation with the authority, no? The authority is supposed to know. Even in Europe, no? Lacan used to say the analyst is the subject supposed to know. Today, I'm not sure this is still very much true with Google, with the artificial intelligence. I don't know if people still suppose the analyst to know. Here there is this supposition. There is this supposition that the boss knows best, that the teacher knows best, that the counselor knows best, and then he must have the answers. Otherwise, why I should consult him? No, there is this cultural understanding that the counselor, the social worker, the psychologist, they are the expert, they know the answer, and they have to give me the answer. There is also, Hong Kong is a very capitalistic society, so there is this, on one side, on one end, this cultural expectation that the consultant, the counselor, the expert has the answer, and then that I pay and I receive a service. So, of course, all these dimensions combined, you see, they go against psychoanalysis or a kind of analytic work. So the premises are not the easiest for psychoanalysts to develop here. To be honest, I didn't find also the fierce criticism or prejudice against psychoanalysis. Hong Kong is a very practical attitude and a very eclectic attitude. The Chinese thinking, particularly in Hong Kong, is very eclectic, very practical. What works? So there is an interest also for psychoanalysis. In Europe, I studied in Italy, in Germany, in universities. There are a lot of people, a lot of academic professors, they are totally against psychoanalysis, no, for the things that we know, because it's not evidence-based, blah, blah, blah. I have to say here, I never found, when I was doing research in university, I didn't find anything against that. There is curiosity, why not? If it's useful, we might integrate it. But at the same time, these concepts, these ideas, this something that the analysis in the end has to do with something slippery that we never can grasp until the end. In analysis, we play with the words, we play with the ambiguity, with the equivocity of the signifiers. And for us, this is a resource because this ambiguity of the signifiers is what allow us to find some other possible understanding. No, when someone comes to analysis, they come lamenting some symptom, they have some belief, they have some certainty, and the work of the analysis is to dissolve these certainties, these symptoms, precisely thanks to the ambiguity of the signifiers. Here, in this context, very, very practical, very much oriented towards the advice, the solutions, the practicality, the communication. Here, this ambiguity of the signifier is perceived as a confusion. It's perceived as confusion. This is also, I think, the sign of our times. It's Hong Kong, it's maybe capitalist society. It's probably also the sign of our times with social media and this over simplification of communication. Anyway, here this is an obstacle. Other things you have to consider. Hong Kong, 7 million people. Hong Kong is unique because it has been a colony. Until 1997, Hong Kong has been a colony of UK. It has been a colony for 150 years. So it was very much open to the West. In Asia, it was one of the few places that were open to the West. It was a gate between China and the West. If you wanted to go to China, you had to pass from Hong Kong and vice versa. And many people came to, many practitioners, many therapists came to Hong Kong to teach their techniques, etc. Never psychoanalysts. Also because Hong Kong had this, let's say, this connection with the UK and the US. So the influence was very much these North American theories, universities from UK, North America, North American theories, so very little psychoanalysis. This is also another factor because lacking any training opportunity, lacking any supervision opportunity, lacking any opportunity of being in analysis, also made it impossible to develop, no? Because you can learn CBT on the books, you can learn, you don't need to be supervised, you don't need to be yourself with a CBT therapist. You can become a CBT therapist just by studying some books. It's not the same with psychoanalysis. So this is another major limitation. Hong Kong is also a city that has always been a city of migration. People used to escape from China, coming to Hong Kong, going to the West. Hong Kong has always been a city of business. This practical attitude of the Chinese thinking is really emphasized here in Hong Kong, because you have to consider Hong Kong today is a very rich place, it's a very modern city, but until not long ago it was a city where people came to find fortune. People migrated, flee from China, and their main concern was to make ends meet, to survive, to eat. So you can imagine they were very much concerned with finding a job. It has never been a cultural city, Hong Kong. There has never been, in China, of course, there are also literate people, but in Hong Kong they never came. It has always emphasized this dimension of business, and it's a very efficient city. Everything is quick, everything must be productive, everyone must be productive. Everything must go very fast. Even the escalator in the city are faster than in other cities. You can imagine we are in a place where even since you are very young, you are into this system, this working culture. Even the kids very young, they have to learn some musical instruments, not because they like it, but because they will put it on the CV, and they will get hopefully to a better school and to a better university. And in summertime they don't go traveling, they do some internship in some company trying to secure a better job. So there is this very distinctive capitalistic, very goal-oriented culture. It's very difficult to find a vocation. It's all driven to a goal, an objective, no? But not a personal objective, not a process of discovery, a process of trying to fit in society. So these are some difficulties. So when I came to Hong Kong, I started my research, and in parallel I also started to receive patients. I started to see people because despite all the things that I said, there's room for psychoanalysis also here. Yes, I didn't find many people knowing what psychoanalysis is. Many people had no idea, but many people are also educated abroad, and some were looking specifically for a psychoanalyst. So I think there is also room. I started to see patients, and I can say I had maybe three major cohorts, three major groups of patients, and they were finding me for slightly different reasons. So I had Italian patients. Italian people, they were looking for me only for the language. Usually they didn't have any idea about me being a psychiatrist, a psychologist, a psychoanalyst. It was not important. The important was the language. Then I had some Chinese patients, and the Chinese patients usually they were looking for me specifically for psychoanalysis. So for some reason they discover psychoanalysis, usually because they studied maybe abroad during university, so they were aware of that, and they wanted precisely psychoanalysis. And that's the reason why they were looking for someone, even though I don't speak Chinese. And then let's say other non-Chinese patients, Western in general, not necessarily English mother tongue, so it could be European or from Central America or Australia.
While reading your fantastic book, I highly recommend it to all of you. I found particularly interesting also that part about the beginning of psychoanalysis in China, the time of Freud. So perhaps if you could elaborate on this just a bit with the first analyst and so on, since I found that extremely interesting also when it comes to the attempts to translate the words like the unconscious, symbol, and so on.
Yeah, so psychoanalysis. When I started my research, I found out that even though psychoanalysis today is unknown to the majority of people, actually during the 20s, so 100 years ago, already came to China, like it also came to the Soviet Union, no? Meaning that there was an exchange between intellectuals, and there was even the first Chinese analyst, I think it was in 1935, who went to study in the US, so certain psychoanalysis, but still there was an openness, because also China was in a moment of transition. China was under the emperor until 1912, something like that, and then there was the Kuomintang before the revolution of Mao Zedong and the modern political party, no? So during those years there was a little bit more openness, and and there was globally maybe an openness, an idea of revolution, of modernity. Psychoanalysis was interesting to the intellectuals. The problem is that the intellectuals were not interesting or useful to the regime, like any regime, no? Because psychoanalysis is analysis, simply put. So the analysis, the critical thinking is something that on the paper is beautiful, but in some context doesn't serve the purpose of the people, the political class. You have to imagine that China is the most ancient society in the world. I think it's 5,000 years, no? The history of China is very fascinating because China never attacked any other country, no? They built a wall to stay within that wall, and they tried to unify the different parts of China. They tried to build their own country, their own system. So they, from very long ago, they had this idea of making one, of becoming one, of being united. Something like psychoanalysis that is now practicing the critical thinking, the listening to the unconscious, the difference of the speech introduces, no? The difference that we also experience within ourselves. But this is not very useful to a country that aim at creating a cohesive society in which no people are let's say people don't bother in which people they are good citizens, no? If you think about it, who is the most famous Chinese philosopher? We call it philosopher. He's not a philosopher at all, but according to the European, for what we call philosophy. But Confucius is the Chinese, is the most famous philosopher. If you read Confucius, thinking that you will find some very deep thinking or some incredibly meaningful, you will be disappointed. Confucius was working for the emperor, was giving advices for an harmonious society. An harmonious society is a society in which everyone know their place, everyone stay in their place, respect the hierarchy, and live in harmony, meaning live in peace and don't and do what they are told to do. And this works. If you imagine, China is a society more than 1 billion people. It's impossible. It's difficult to manage a society this large. Other societies struggle very much. No, in Europe we have a lot of division, wars, and this part wants to separate, and this part, and we struggle to make even European Union, no, because everyone claim their difference. So you see how different these assumptions are. And so psychoanalysis in China never never rooted, never started, because initially it seems very interesting. They thought it could be useful to change the society, to change people, to somehow manipulate. And then, like in Soviet Union, they realized that it was the opposite. They discarded and they chose some other discipline, CBT or whatever. And precisely, and also the psychoanalytic terms, the unconscious, is very difficult to say what is the unconscious. It's still difficult for us today, what is the unconscious. Already the question, what is? But the unconscious is not a thing, it's not what. It's something that we experience, it's something that we encounter. Can you imagine translate the unconscious? It cannot be translated, in Chinese, they tried to grasp it, they didn't understand it. They tried to translate it, they translated as in the end something that stays under. They translate it like subconscious, this idea that there is something under. In the end, they were confused. They rejected all, because precisely because it didn't have any. For them, it was difficult to translate into something practical, and so psychoanalysis lasted very, very short. It was immediately discarded and goodbye. Maybe until the 80s, in China at the end of the 80s they had some opening to the world, so suddenly they were open to again, and so they took some interest also about psychoanalysis, and today there are also many psychoanalysts from Europe, many from the US, who have some programs in China. I tried to understand a little bit better. I am not so confident that it's working. It's very difficult. I'm a little bit skeptical about that. But there are also some Chinese analysts who went to study in Paris, and they have their formation. It's very difficult to practice in China. It's very difficult to change this relation to the world. I think it's difficult. I think we also have to learn a little bit. When I came to Hong Kong, I also learned about a little bit maybe Europe, our way of thinking, and also the US. Let's say Hong Kong emphasized this very practical thinking, very practical style of living. But also the US, they are very pragmatic, and even the language, even when we write in Italian, in French, we have very long sentence with many periods, with many sub-sentences, with very articulated thinking, and sometimes it goes nowhere. So there is also a merit, I think, in being a little bit more synthetic and straight to the point, no? And even the philosophy, the continental, the European philosophy, no? Philosophers in Europe always philosophy was born, no? Thinking about the great questions of life, where we come from, where we go, what's the meaning of life. It's not the same in the US. Their philosophy is much more pragmatic. It's much more. Is very different. There are less maybe ideologies, and I think there is also some merit in maybe be less ideological, even though we could of course discuss about that.
Yes, I have a comment and maybe a question as well. Diego, thank you very much for this insight about psychoanalysis in Hong Kong and psychoanalysis in China. And it's very interesting to hear actually that there is a voice of psychoanalysis in China and in Hong Kong in a way. And for me, it's the context that you presented to us today of China, of Hong Kong. In a certain sense, I find it very similar as the space of ex-Yugoslavia in a certain way. You mentioned this collectivism, you mentioned this ideology that was going to being one, let's say totalitarianism, in a way that maybe was an obstacle for psychoanalysis besides the language, besides the Chinese language. It's very interesting. On the other hand side, the symptoms that you punctuated when you started the practice that are more resonating to the times of Freud than maybe times of Lacan. And I would the question would maybe go in the direction of what do you think is the reason for this? Is it just an index of time that we live in right now, or maybe one of the reasons was that there was not, as you say, a psychoanalytic discourse that was rooted during this period, during the 20th century?
Thank you for the question. It's very difficult. I don't have. It's something that I've been thinking about. Let's say, I think there is still the different register that works here. Hong Kong is a very unique place because it's a place where a lot of Chinese migrated from the mainland China. So when people go abroad, usually what happens? I lived 1 year in Germany and I met many Italians who migrated 40 years before. And I noticed that they still maintain the same tradition. Their country of origins changed, but they maintained the same tradition. So in Hong Kong I find the very old tradition, even maybe more traditional than China sometimes. At the same time, this maybe fascination from the US, because here in Hong Kong, usually when they speak about Western society, they usually mean the US. No, they don't think much about, yes, Europe is a beautiful place, we go on vacation, but let's say the UK and US, also for the language, you know, these are the standards. So the American way of life, the money, etc. So in Hong Kong, there are these levels, and so the tradition, the Chinese values, and capitalism. And it's a good question. What will be, how symptoms will shift when they are more exposed to, because the people who presented these symptoms, they were Chinese, they grew up here. It may change when they move abroad. They changes with the discourse. Here, I find this to some extent. Sometimes I think about Hong Kong like it was maybe Italy 60 years ago. When I think about the society, here many people live with their family. Oftentimes they say 3 generations under the same roof. The grandma, the parents, and the children, and they live all together. So there is a very strong tradition, and the young people, when they start working, they have to pay 1/3 of their salary to the parents. There is a strong it's quite prescriptive, and in this sense there is a difficulty to emancipate and to and so in a way that there is still this hierarchical, paternalistic culture, and these symptoms that maybe we don't see that much anymore, because the clinic has shifted for us. We see more lack of limits, and the clinic with the lack of limits and the excess, not with the clinic of repression. Here there is maybe more this, when at least with the local people, maybe still the effects of the repression, and then maybe when I see Westerners, is the opposite, is people more adrift, more lost, with no clear direction, with symptoms like panic attacks, anxiety, etc. So it's something that should be explored not more, also because the local Cantonese Chinese is very difficult. I don't speak the language, so unfortunately I'm a little bit cut out by a big portion of what's going on, and of course even the Chinese have their struggle, because yes, it's a culture that is very practical, but with all these limitations, the speech, the relation to the speech is the relation of power. It's not the relation to my truth, or what's going on with me, or what do I think about this and that. So, for example, one big problem that there is in Hong Kong is that a lot of people suicide, a lot of youth, they take their life by jumping off the buildings. Here is the city with the highest number of big buildings in the world. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't have, a lot of youth don't have the resources, don't have the attitude towards talking, thinking, reflecting, and so many people took their life because maybe they cannot also envision themselves being able to change. So there is, of course, a limit of this practicality, because there is no room for thinking. And this, in a strange way, is where, to some extent, I think maybe the Chinese values meet the capitalistic values of a speech that is used for power struggle, not for carrying a truth, a personal truth, or for questioning about themselves. And I think, unfortunately, in these last few years, I think we can experience, we observe an emphasis on this speech that has lost the relation with the truth, with the subjective truth. No, in this, I don't know in the Balkans, I don't know in Europe, but here in Hong Kong, from my point of observation, no, in the last few years, it's incredible. There is a lot of people. There are a lot of people. They say they feel they have the imposter syndrome. No, they lament this imposture, and there is this phenomenon of the fake news. And if you look at the markets, no, there is a total disconnection. The economy goes down, the situation is bad, but the stock market is at the top high. So there is a disconnection between the life, the lived life, and the representation and the virtual life. And there is no more relation. No, the word, the speech, it became something just to gain consensus. It doesn't matter. You can say, which is a paradox, no? Because we are in the age of internet, where the informations are available for everyone, but we are in the ears of the scam, of the frauds, of the imposture. We have lost the relation no, of the speech with any truth, with any questioning, understanding, with a more intellectual dimension. The speech became a tool for convincing others, for exerting some power on others. No, this at a global level. So it seems that it's very difficult for psychoanalysis in this kind of context, no? Because everything became an object for business, for selling. Even these counselors that are here in Hong Kong, all is a business. All no, they have their own practice. They have their own office, beautiful location, very high fees. They work with insurance, few sessions. No, it's all commercialized, but there is no quality. There is no any depth of thinking. There is nothing interesting. It became this logic of the business is very strong here. I think it's probably strong on a global scale. Maybe here is just anticipating something that is happening globally. Because yes, I mentioned it's interesting. No, there are some similarities with the Balkans. In the Balkans, at least, maybe in Europe, there is this tradition of thinking, of reflecting, of analyzing. That sometimes is too much. Sometimes it leads to a thinking that is disconnected from something pragmatic. No, sometimes it's a thinking that goes in circle. Sometimes it's a thinking that leads to some immobilism, to never do anything. But at least there is this dimension of thinking. Here in Asia, in Hong Kong in particular, not all Asia, but Hong Kong in particular, there is this business mindset, which is, yes, it can be practical, it can be, things are done, but there is also this emphasis on productivity. You must be productive all the time. And I can find this reflected in the symptoms of the people who comes to see me, because this need to be always productive, to be always doing things, but people sometimes they are completely lost. They know that they have to continue going, but going where? Many people they lost direction. Another symptom of our time, of these last few years, if you think about it, ADHD. Here I hear that all the time. I don't know how it's in the Balkans. Here many people claim they have ADHD. What they mean by ADHD? They mean they cannot focus on something, they are easily distracted, they have to go in any direction, but they don't know why or where. So there is this idea that you have to be productive all the time, that you have to be in motion all the time, but where, why, what? It's difficult to slow down these people and keep them to think about what they are talking about, what they are thinking, why they do what they do. It's a difficulty. It's a difficulty to engage these people in a psychoanalytic process, no? Because they sometimes they are like flyers, no? That go in circle and hit the window, no? This is a difficulty of our times, I think, especially maybe more after COVID. So, these are some other thoughts. I don't know.